to spend this lesson in the Eastern Mediterranean. Now, about 12,000 years ago, after the last ice age, our collective ancestors wandered out of North Africa, where they had spent the cold years of the ice age, taking their sustenance from the oceans, which did not freeze over. Anyhow, they wandered out of Africa into the Eastern Mediterranean and really found themselves smack dab in the Garden of Eden. They found an area that was the perfect environment for agriculture. And they had one big idea, because up to that point they had been nomadic. The big idea was, how about if we embrace or even invent agriculture, and rather than going from place to place to place looking for what we need to survive, we manipulate our environment to give us what we need to survive. And that took place in the Eastern Mediterranean, there between the Tigris and the Euphrates River, and spread from there. That changed everything. That's really where the fun began. Now, before that, many of the people there had been nomadic, and a nomadic people have a very different model of eating. They don't have huge kitchens with big ovens, and so they cook things simply. Oftentimes it's meat skewered and cooked over open flame, or maybe vegetables, instead of being sautéed, are roasted in the dying embers of a fire. Fast forward to today, and some of those same simple dishes and simple techniques are making their way back onto menus in the form of street food. And so we're going to enjoy some of that food today. Falafel, a couple of vegetable salads to go along. And let's start right here. I have some yogurt. And this yogurt has been mixed with a little bit of salt, seasoned, and then put to drip in a piece of cheesecloth. And you can see exactly how much whey has fallen out of this yogurt. And as the whey drains out, it gets thicker and thicker and thicker. After 24 to 48 hours, it will be thick enough that I could shape it into a simple rudimentary cheese and give it another 12 hours uncovered in the refrigerator, and it'll be firm enough that I can roll it into a ball. And that cheese is known as labneh. And take a peek at what I've done right here. I've taken that cheese and I've rolled it into some spice mixtures. Spice mixtures that you're already familiar with, because we addressed these earlier in a show on olive oil. So if you'll recall, dukkha, an Egyptian spice mix that has nuts and sesame, it's got cumin, it's got coriander, and I've rolled some of that cheese in dukkha. Over here, za'atar is sumac, wild thyme, and sesame, and I took 3 more pieces of the cheese and I rolled it in za'atar. I would take both of those then and just dress them with olive oil, and this could easily be spread onto a piece of pita bread, and off you go. Let me just set these aside for right now. And before we leave this behind, this cheese, as it is right now, has been draining for about 12 hours. So while it's thick, it's certainly not thick enough to hold its shape. It's more like what you see right here. The whey that's in the bottom can be utilized a couple of different ways. I have cooked potatoes in the whey, and it's amazing how well they brown after they've been cooked in whey. Sometimes people make this into a refreshing drink. I've made bread with whey, so don't discard it. It's a valuable ingredient. Okay, so labneh with dukkha, labneh with za'atar, and here, ember roasted eggplants. Imagine these eggplants nestled in the dying embers at the edge of a fire until they collapse, they cook all the way through, and if they char a little bit on the outside, so much the better. Now, at home, if you don't have a live fire burning in your kitchen, you can fire roast these on top of the stove, turning them over an open flame until they collapse like this, or alternately put them into a hot oven at about 425, 450, and let them roast and char a little bit. If they char and they take on a smoky flavor, so much the better. It's really delicious. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to take and split the belly of this eggplant open. I'm going to scoop out the pulp and put it right into a bowl. Now, don't make the mistake of undercooking this eggplant. It should not be al dente. It should not be firm. It should be soft. It should be really soft. And just so I can get a little bit more, I'm going to go after this second one as well. That second one is actually a little bit smokier. It has a wonderful smoky flavor. All right, you don't have to be too concerned about a piece or two of the outside making its way into the salad. I think this is a rustic salad, and just a little fleck of charred skin is not the end of the world. All right, I'm going to stir this up. I'm going to break it up, and once I've opened it, I like to put some lemon juice in so that it stays a little bit whiter or lighter in color. I'm going to flavor it with garlic, and this is just garlic mashed to a paste that's going to go in. Season it with salt and pepper. And when it's relatively smooth, then we're going to introduce some of this drained yogurt, this thickened yogurt. The nice thing about having the yogurt slightly thicker than you expect yogurt to be is that the moisture from the vegetables won't make it soupy. Okay? So, and this simple smoky eggplant salad with yogurt is all but done. We've just got to taste it and make sure we're happy with the flavor. So that's all there is to that. This salad is done. Now, you might think of this as a dip. Likely you wouldn't think of it as a salad, but there's a lot of preparations very similar to this that they call salads. As an example, tzatziki, which is yogurt and cucumbers, you might think of as a sauce that you spoon on, but they would call it a yogurt and cucumber salad. All right, so that salad is done. It's delicious, it's simple, it's easy to do. Next, I'd like to make a similar salad that follows almost the same trajectory, but I'm going to add some mint and some sugar. This is going to be a yogurt salad with roasted beets. So maybe you've been wondering why I've been wearing gloves this lesson. Well, this is the reason right here. I'm going to peel some beets, and unless you want pink hands, gloves are the answer. These beets have been roasted in the oven until they're tender, and you can tell they're tender by piercing them with a knife, and the knife goes in easily but also pulls out just as easily. The great thing about beets is that when they're fully cooked, the peel will simply slip right off of them. Now, you say it's not that big a deal for me to peel them before you're cooking them, but here's what you need to know. The pigment that gives especially red beets and orange beets their color is water soluble. So if you peel them first and then you cook them in water, I can guarantee you your beets will come out looking kind of sickly and anemic because all of their color ends up in the water. Better by far that you leave the root on, you leave a little bit of the top on, and you leave the peel on until after they're roasted. And then the easy way to peel them is to take a towel like this, paper towel works as well, and you just rub the skin off the outside. And there's one all done. I'll just make quick work of these, and I've got one or two more to peel. This is a white beet, and this one would not lose its color because it has no color. In fact, it's gotten a little color from the red beets that it cooked with. I've got golden beets and I've got red beets here. These are pretty small beets, and they're my favorite because they seem to cook a little bit more evenly and a little bit more quickly. Sometimes very big beets can, take an hour or an hour and a half to cook, and I kind of lose interest at that point. So I'm going to trim the stem and the root off. And these beets are ready to go. Next, we're going to take these beets and I'm going to grate them. And I've got a grater right here. It should go very fast because these beets are cooked perfectly. Beets have an incredibly earthy flavor, and they can be a challenge for some people to enjoy because of that earthiness. The secret for me is aggressive seasoning. So don't let that earthiness be the star. Instead, let it be a supporting player. Now I can be done with the gloves. And the model for this salad is going to look very similar to the model from the one we had previously. I'm going to put some acid in here in the form of lemon juice. And as I said, rein in that earthiness by using plenty of acid. I've got the same garlic that I put into the previous salad that I'm going to add here. But this time I'm going to take mint, and we'll add mint to this salad as well. There's something great about the flavor of mint and the sweet earthiness of beets. And then just a little bit of sweetness. I've got some sugar here, and this will underscore the natural sweetness of the beets themselves. Season it with salt and some pepper. And then again, we're going to go back to this yogurt, this drained yogurt, which is nice and thick, and we'll bind this salad with yogurt. Not so much yogurt that you lose track of the flavor of the salad itself. This is a beet salad, and so I want to make sure that we don't lose track of that beet flavor. Okay, again, we'll stir this together. This salad just looks like a party. It's got so much great color to it. It's exciting just to look at it, and you can imagine that it tastes great. And I'm going to take, and we'll scrape this salad together. Both of these salads will live very happily in your refrigerator for 2 or 3 days. So don't be shy about making a little bit extra. And if you wanted to bring them to the table together, if you wanted to garnish this particular salad, what I would do is make a couple of swirls in it, just like this, and then drizzle on some olive oil and let it collect in the openings of the salad, and then a little bit of cracked pepper, and we'll call that a day. So, one technique, draining yogurt turned into yogurt cheese or labneh and turned into 2 very distinctive salads. So distinctive, in fact, that I doubt your guests will ever recognize that this smoky eggplant salad is made almost exactly the same way as this roasted beet salad. Okay, I want to share with you one of my favorite street foods. Here in the San Francisco Bay Area, down in Oakland, there's a food truck that serves nothing but falafel. And as the seasons unfold, they serve it side by side with a little salad, whatever's best and brightest at the produce market each given week. So you might see falafel with the smoky eggplant salad that I already showed you during the summer, but in the springtime when beets are prevalent, you might see that beet salad side by side with a falafel. In either case, falafel begins its life as a humble chickpea or a garbanzo bean. Here they are dried, and I took some of these dried garbanzos or chickpeas and I soaked them in water for 24 hours, and you can see exactly what happens. They grow. They are almost twice their original size. That's important. What I don't want you to do is try and make falafel from canned, cooked garbanzos, because they won't work out very well at all. You need the raw starch in these garbanzos or these chickpeas so that they will bind together properly. I'm going to drain these and get rid of the moisture. And we're going to grind them up. And I'm going to grind them in the food processor. But not before I add some seasoning to the mix. I'm going to introduce some onions. I'm going to put in some garlic, and it can be whole cloves because they're going to get ground anyhow. I'm going to add cumin. Pepper flakes to your taste. But don't overdo it. You can always add more or serve your falafel with a little spicy sauce. And then 2 separate herbs. I've got parsley here and I've got cilantro. And my favorite falafel is always green with herbs. Okay, we're going to grind this up. Now, don't grind it to a perfectly smooth puree. This is not baby food. This is falafel. It should be just slightly granular. And you can stop it and check it any number of times. And when you're happy and confident that the texture is right, then you can stop. It's probably a good idea for me to go ahead and season this with salt. They like salt and a little bit of pepper in addition to the pepper flakes. Here we go. I'm going to grind it. I'm going to keep it slightly granular. Better that you should stop it once or twice and look in and make sure you're happy with the outcome. It still is a little bit coarse, and so we mix it again. At this point, I'd say it's been about 30, 35 seconds, 40 seconds. Certainly within a minute, we're going to be where we want to be here. Okay, so let's see what we've got. The texture is still slightly granular, and when you feel it, this is moist. I want this to be able to bind together into a little ball, and if it's not quite there, we can adjust the consistency by adding a little bit of flour. Oftentimes people's complaint about falafel is that they're heavy, and so I also like to put some baking powder in as well. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to sprinkle in some baking powder, a couple of teaspoons. And I'm going to add a little bit of flour just until I get a consistency that is slightly less firm than I want. And I'll tell you, or I'll explain that in a second here. This is probably 1/3 cup of flour. Once the flour has been added, don't mix it too much. You don't want this to turn into bread dough. You want it to stay tender, not elastic and springy. That little bit of flour is probably enough so that I can form it into a loose ball. Wouldn't be a bad idea to taste it. This is almost like tasting savory cake batter. The raw flavor of the chickpeas will cook out, but I want you to evaluate it for the salt that it has in it. This to me tastes like it could use just a little bit more salt. All right, so you can see this holds a loose ball when I form it together. Sometimes if it's a little bit wetter, I set it aside for an hour or so and just let that flour absorb excess moisture. I have some here that's been sitting for about an hour, but I'm going to go ahead and work with this and I think we'll be fine. I have a pan for frying these. I've got a neutral oil in there. A pure olive oil would be fine, likewise a canola oil, any oil that can withstand high temperatures. And if you have a thermometer, you want the temperature to be right around 350 to 375 degrees, right in that range. Closer to 350 is probably better. When you're frying in a pan like this, make sure the pan is no more than half full with oil. There needs to be some room for that oil to grow and seethe when you put moist food in there. So don't make the mistake of filling it too full. I have it in a shallow pan because I want you to be able to see what I'm doing, but if I were doing this at home, I would have it in a slightly deeper pan with more room. Anyhow, let's go ahead and fry some of these. I've got 2 spoons, and what I like to do is shape them into a little egg shape here. And then we'll just drop them into the oil. If you're not comfortable making these shapes, you can shape them ahead. You can use an ice cream scoop. Some people just roll it in the palms of their hand. I think this is an attractive shape, and that's the reason that I use it. And it goes pretty quickly. When they brown on one side, you just give them a little flip over. They're pretty agreeable about rolling over in this hot fat. And if they begin to take a long time to cook, that's indicative of you maybe putting too many into the oil. So don't overload the oil. Fry them in batches. That's the way they taste best. Nice and hot from the fryer. If you're lucky enough to have a little tabletop deep fat fryer, then by all means use it. But this is what I've got, and so this is what I'm using here. Start to finish, these will fry in, 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, something like that. The first are coming out right now, and they look great. You might want to do a little tester beforehand, before your meal begins, just so that you know they'll hold together and you'll know that the temperature of the oil is right. If you fry them too hot, sometimes they get over browned and they don't look very appealing. So I like them when they're golden like this with just a hint of the green herbs showing through the outside. While these are frying, I'm going to set up to make a little salad right here. And it's a salad I like very much, and it's very simple. What you see in this bowl is purslane, and I saved this from our gardener who sees this as a weed, but what he sees as a weed, I see as a delicious salad vegetable. Purslane has the same omega-3 oils that salmon has that's so good for your heart. It's kind of lemony, it eats almost like a succulent. It's a little bit chewy, and it's something that you see used often in the Eastern Mediterranean in a number of different salads. The salad that I'm going to make here today couldn't be simpler. Purslane, washed and plucked into pieces, some cherry tomatoes, and some shaved red onion. Hit that with a little bit of salt, likewise some pepper, splash on some lemon juice, and some good extra virgin olive oil, and that's all there is to that. You know, I was able to mix this together while the falafel are frying, so don't feel as if this food has to be really complex. Okay, let's see how we're making out here. There's a couple more that I think are done, and these along the edge likewise. Here we go. As you're nearly done frying the falafel, I'm going to recommend that you stop for a second, relax, and recognize that this can be dangerous. So for me, before I'm done, I turn the heat off over the oil or under the oil, and I let the residual heat finish the last 2 or 3 pieces. That way, when I get excited about eating falafel, I don't inadvertently forget this pan of oil on the stove and leave the heat on underneath. All right, these are done. Out they come. And we are just about ready to eat. These are the fixins for making a really great sandwich. I'm going to slice up some of this lettuce. I've got some pita bread, and maybe you've had this sauce before. It's pretty simple. This is tahini, sesame paste, mixed with garlic, a little bit of olive oil, and some lemon juice. This is the traditional sauce for enjoying on falafel. Out of the fryer, I'm going to season these with a little bit more salt. And then we'll take a pita bread, open it up, and spoon in just a little bit of the sauce. Tuck in some lettuce. Some of these shaved red onions. A slice or two of tomato. And then we'll add some falafel to the mix. And a little more sauce over the top. And let me go ahead and do that again. You'll find some people that like it really crunchy and others like it a little bit softer. But I think the sauce over the top. And then we're going to tuck it right in here. And there you have it. There's falafel sandwiches. I have a little purslane salad. This would also taste great right inside of your falafel sandwich or on the side the way I'm serving it here. And any number of those salads that we made earlier, the eggplant, the beets, would taste delicious with this meal. So while it's street food, I think you can bring street food into your home and you can enjoy the flavors of the Eastern Mediterranean anytime you want, now that you know how to make falafel from scratch. So when our ancestors settled in the Eastern Mediterranean and embraced agriculture, it was wheat they were growing and wheat that sustained them. Now, if you've ever tried to eat wheat berries, they're not very pleasant on their own. They can be pretty hard. It's great that you can dry them and store them from one year to the next. But when you try to cook them, they can take hours to get tender. And so our ancestors learned to grind the wheat berries into flour and make bread. They also came up with a brilliant idea, and that was to take wheat berries and pre-cook them or steam them until they were tender and then dry them and crack them. And if you were hungry for what is known as bulgur wheat, pre-cooked wheat, you simply put boiling water over the top and you allowed it to rehydrate, and it was ready to go in about 5 or 10 minutes. That's what bulgur wheat is. And the exciting thing to imagine is that that was one of the first convenience foods that we came up, and it had its genesis there in the Eastern Mediterranean. Just one thing you need to know about bulgur wheat. It comes in different grinds or different coarsenesses. And I have here on the left a fine bulgur. You can see the grain is very, very fine. And here on the right, a coarse bulgur that is significantly more coarse, probably 4 or 5 times the size. If I pour boiling water over this fine bulgur, 10 minutes later it's tender, I can drain the water off, and this is what you have left behind. It's tender, it's delicious, it's moist, and it's cooked. If I do the same with this coarse bulgur, 10 minutes later the water has cooled, I drain it, and it's still very tough. I might have to pour water, boiling water over it a second, maybe even a third time. Usually this coarse bulgur, they cook almost like rice in the Eastern Mediterranean. So it's not uncommon, for instance, to see a bulgur pilaf instead of a rice pilaf. For this dish that we're making, tabbouleh, we're going to use the fine bulgur. So I'm going to get rid of the coarse and set it aside. But just make sure that you buy the right one if you want to recreate this recipe. I'm going to take the fine and set it aside as well. And what I have here is the bulgur that I poured boiling water over, and then I drained it and allow it to sit, and it cools down and absorbs any moisture that's clinging to the outside. Now, likely you've tasted tabbouleh before, and likely if you've tasted it and you described it to someone else, you've said, you know, it was kind of a bulgur wheat salad that had some vegetables in it. But if you go to the Eastern Mediterranean, what they will tell you is that this is first and foremost a parsley salad that has just enough bulgur to bind it. So that's a little shift in thinking, and I think it's an important one. We don't think of parsley as a vegetable, we think of parsley as a garnish. But this is a parsley salad. Let's go ahead and make it. To the small amount of bulgur that I have in this, and it's probably no more than 1/3 of a cup, I'm going to add some chopped tomatoes, or here, these are cherry tomatoes that have been cut in half. I'm going to add some cucumbers. And when I add cucumbers to a salad, I like to leave the green peel on at least some of the cucumbers because I like the color and I like the different flavors. I've got green onions that have been shredded, and I'll add those. I've got a little bit of mint, which makes this salad bright. Oftentimes you will see garlic make its way into tabbouleh, and I like garlic in tabbouleh, but the other salads I've already prepared for this meal, the eggplant and the beets, both of them had garlic in it, as did the tahini sauce. So let's take a break from the garlic and not add it to this particular version. The last thing that we're going to add is parsley. And I'm going to put this amount of parsley in and say that is just about enough. Let me go ahead and chop a little bit more. I'm going to bring this parsley out and I'm going to shave it from the stems. And then the big stems I'm going to pull out. Once the coarse stems are pulled out of the parsley, the easiest way to chop a lot of parsley, and that's what tabbouleh demands, is to gather it up into a tight little ball. It may feel like you're being a little bit rough with it, but I guarantee you this is the easiest way to do it. And once you have it in a nice tight little ball and you chop through it one time, it will already be under control. Just make sure you know where your fingertips are, and we should be able to make quick work of this. If you've never considered parsley to be a vegetable or a salad green, it's kind of eye-opening to chop it, because as you chop it, you get this wonderful sweet smell that comes off the cutting board. It's really pretty spectacular. All right, so that is that. And into the bowl it goes. And we are ready to finish this salad. A little salt, a little bit of pepper, lemon juice, and a good quality extra virgin olive oil. The proportions are probably 1-to-1, slightly more lemon juice here. And when you stir it together, you'll notice there's just enough bulgur wheat to bind this together, but not so much that this stops being a parsley salad. The great news is that if the tomatoes weep out a little bit of moisture, the bulgur will be there to capture it. All right, this salad's at its best if it can sit for 15 minutes before you serve it. But let's go ahead and plate it up right now. So here's a beautiful meal. It's a simple meal, and for me as a chef, that's tremendously exciting. When I was a young chef, it was not uncommon that I was never happier than if I had a dish that needed to be boiled and then braised and then boned out and then purposed and reconditioned and frozen and so on and so forth. But now, the simpler a preparation can be and still be craveable and delicious, the happier I am. And this food right here really speaks to that idea. This is simple food, simply prepared, but it's delicious and it resonates from the Eastern Mediterranean directly to your table.